Okay, we're live. Welcome, welcome. Today's topic, shielding your small business, essential strategies to hack-proof your company. Thank you for joining me. My name is Logan Edmonds, CEO of TTS, and I am joined by our cybersecurity evangelist, Amy Beery. How are you doing, Amy?
Doing great. Doing great. It's a nice day outside. We're alive, and it's all you can ask for.
I was going to say, I liked yesterday better here in Ohio. It was nice and cool yesterday. Today, we're a little bit more toasty.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive into the meat and potatoes. This is only a 30-minute presentation. We're running a few minutes late, and I apologize for anybody who was hanging out waiting on this. But so, what is today's topic? So obviously, cybercrime is the big headline for today. Things have changed. To give you context, today's headline I saw in the news in NBC4 here in Columbus, Ohio. Amy, I should have sent you this link. Cyber criminals are trying to extort the city of Columbus. They stole a chunk of its data and said, "Pay us, or we'll dump this data up for auction. All your logins, everything." And they're getting very brazen because this is being reported by a public news channel. Everybody can see it. That was not a thing even 4 or 5 years ago. We've got foreign cyber attackers now holding a capital city essentially hostage.
It's disturbing.
Things have changed. Why and how? Well, but first and foremost, we're going to reference a lot of stats today. And we have resources for these stats. So if you're wondering, hey, where are we referencing this from? I have a list of resources here, right, put on the slide because we're going to go all over the place. If you ever want a copy of these resources, just hit us up in the chat, in the comments. We'll point you to the links and or DM you a list of the links depending on which ones you're after. So, first and foremost, what's the most alarming stat? This thing is incredibly expensive. Cyber criminals hijacked $9.5 trillion with a T in 2023 by all best estimates. 9.5 trillion. That is a big number. That is more money than Japan or Germany outputs as a GDP economy in a year's time. For those of you who are wondering, the total economy in 2023 was $105 trillion. What does that mean? Well, let's do napkin math. Cyber criminals basically cost the world 9% of every dollar last year, one way or another. That means we're paying for this whether we want to or not. At that level, I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling amount of money, but it's almost like a tax. It really is a 9% universal tax being put on everybody. Because what happens when companies?
I'm sure that's underreported because people don't want to admit that that's happened to them, or they may not even realize it's happened until months later. So I have a feeling, even though that number is astronomical and hard to comprehend, I have a feeling that there's a lot of people that don't report or report late.
These are estimates by best, right? Like this is honestly what we're finding is exactly what you said. Like there is, and you're kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but it's okay because what we're going to see is how much they're going to get in 2024. And this is a hard number to pin down exactly for the reason that you said. People don't like to talk about this. The amount of businesses that we talk to, Amy, all the time where they say, oh yeah, I lost 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, $100,000 last year because someone impersonated one of my vendors, someone got access to my bank account, someone ransomed my computers. It's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling. I saw reports coming in not too long ago that cyber criminals were basically bragging on the dark web that they managed to get the world's biggest ransom ever recorded. They managed to hold some kind of publicly traded company. They didn't disclose who, but they were bragging, of course. So take this as you will. But they were bragging that they managed to extort a company for $75 million. A one-time fee. And that's the big question, right? Like they're not going anywhere. I think that's the thing. And I get it. Times are tough and things are expensive, but for a cyber criminal, this is a huge payday opportunity. And that's what's driving this change. And the only question is how much more? It's going to impact everybody. That's the thing that I really want to stress here. These cyber criminals, they're not doing, by all accounts, for the most part, targeted attacks, Amy. I think you would agree with that. The equivalent of what they're doing nowadays is mostly spraying and praying, right? Instead of a sniper, it's more like a shotgun pointed towards everybody. And they're just pulling that trigger over and over and over until they get something that they want and hit something that they want. And we're going to dig into why.
Let me ask a question.
Yeah, go
Can
for it.
I just want to ask something really quick. So even though companies may have the money at the time to pay a ransom, that doesn't necessarily mean that their data is going to be, I mean, it's out there, it's exposed, it's already a done
It,
deal, right?
it can be. What we've seen, and this is the things are changing, and we're going to dig into why in a second here, because why things are changing. What we're seeing is, unfortunately, this started with COVID-19, right? Unfortunately, when people start working remote, and cyber criminals realize there is an easy way for them to make money, a stupid amount of money. And to give context, if we assume, I'd say the average incident we deal with, Amy, around here for a small business when they get breached is no less than $10,000. That's usually seems to be the floor. If you go to Russia, where we a lot of times allege a lot of these cyber criminals live and operate, they don't have an extradition treaty, so we can't arrest them for what they're doing. And more importantly, the average salary over there when you convert it to USD, it's about $9,000 a year USD. What does that mean? It means the average incident over here, when you take in currency conversion, is basically more or at the equivalency of a year's worth of wages in their home country. What's easier for some of these countries to get into?
It's a no
Building
brainer.
building an economy and actually building it up properly and doing all this stuff that requires value like we do here in the West, or just taking money. And that's you're skipping ahead here, but to answer your question, no, there's no guarantees your data won't get leaked. However, the pressure is real because there are consequences. So I kind of led into this already. Who are we talking about? Well, threat actors are generally organized into four main categories here, and I'm going to go through each one of them. So you've got nation state linked actors. That is a real problem. And before it was like, oh, I don't care about that. Why would the government care about me? Why would any government care about me? What we're seeing is a lot of these sanctioned governments, like the government of Iran and North Korea, allegedly, of course, are operating money raising syndicates through cybercrime. We have had incidents where it looks like by all appearance, and attribution is one of the hardest things to do in our world, Amy. I think you know this, like saying who definitively did this can be very difficult to say. But by all professional guesses, we are seeing incidents even here in Columbus, Ohio, where it looks like a nation state organized an attack against cities, municipalities, small businesses for $100,000, $200,000 payday. It's sanction busting. And like we're saying, it's actually big business. It's a really easy way to prop up an otherwise sanctioned or failing economy. And they're doing it. North Korea is notorious for this. And just to give you context, they raise an average of about I think it's somewhere between $500 million to $1.5 billion. I've seen different numbers of a slush money fund, basically, just by running these games and these operations. And this is how they fund their stuff. So that's a problem. And then, of course, like anything, there's a private sector. That's what they call the cyber criminals. They're the private, they're the mercenaries, right? They can sometimes be linked to nation states. More often than not, they're exclusively financially motivated. They see how much money is on the table, and they go, "Yeah, I want to get a piece of that." And they're causing a lot of the issues that we're seeing right now. Great example of this, you might have heard of the Lockbit gang, the Alf V Black Cat gang, the Play ransomware, the Akira ransomware. They come up with new names, it feels like every year, but you can usually trace them back to one of these bigger gangs. And they run like big businesses. Great example of this, before the Russian-Ukraine conflict started, there used to be a big gang, and I think they're still technically around under a different name. I have to go double check myself on that one. But at the time, they were called the Conti ransomware gang. And their members were mostly based out of Ukraine and Russia by all apparent accounts. Well, obviously, when the conflict started, there was a schism. The Ukrainian members and the Russian members became at odds. And so as part of this, the Ukrainian members dumped all the internal files of the ransomware gang. And we got a huge insight. There were over 300 people on payroll in that gang. And their profits over a 2-year period exceeded $2 billion with a B. If they were a private company, there's a decent chance they would have been listed on a stock market somewhere with those kind of profits. And that's just one gang. It's crazy. We're entering an election cycle, as you know, and we're not going to get political on this talk call. No, thank you. But there is a long and storied history as well of using cybercrime and hacking to express political discontent. And they are out there. I would say they're not the most likely person to come after you, but they're definitely not unlikely at this point. They are rising. We call them politely hacktivists. Usually their agenda is less about financial impact and more about making some kind of statement. They'll knock a big company they perceive as evil offline for a political cause, or they'll DDoS a website to say, hey, you can't access this company's evil, or they'll take over a defacement, right? They'll take over a big publicly traded company's website to advertise their cause. Emails, get dirt on the political candidate. List goes
Like
on.
Anonymous.
Anonymous,
activist group.
Yeah, a good chunk of them would be activists. Anonymous also back in 2010, and it's funny because they used to actually be a little more prevalent, in my opinion. There was a group called Lull Security that was pretty. They were notorious back in the day. There's documentaries on these guys, but like for 50 days, they basically just targeted every company they could come after to advertise their political statements. So yeah, Anonymous would be considered a loose hacktivist organization. Other examples as well, they're actual gangs right now as of 2023 that we would put in the hacktivist column. SiegeSec, Five Families, Black Forums, GhostSec, Stormus, and ThreatSec. These are all names of hacktivist gangs that exist for political reasons. And then last but not least, we're seeing a severe rise of the insider threat. And I want to take a second to talk about this. What is the insider threat? The insider threat is your team. More often than not, it can be a disgruntled former employee or even a current employee. We have seen stories of cyber criminals approaching individuals and bribing them, saying, I'll give you $5,000 if you take this USB stick and plug it in a computer somewhere in your office. It can be, we see this all the time, and there are actual gangs organized around exploiting insider threats. Bronze Gods, the leader, this one's a little hard to say, Nebulte. We can keep going to them, but there are gangs that actually have organized around insider threats to exploit people and leverage that for gain. And usually it's a financial motivation. Sometimes it's a revenge motivation, like a government stuff. I've seen insider threats bleed into all three of the previous categories as well. They're the most hardest ones to nail down. So the big question is who gets attacked? Well, I think I've kind of already said that, but basically everybody. And what we're seeing is small companies. Small companies are getting attacked all over the place because big companies are upping their cyber resiliency. The amount of companies that under $250 million a year, for example, that have cyber insurance is 25%, 1 in 4. Whereas the amount of businesses that make over $5.5 billion a year that have cyber insurance is 75%. Huge disparity. And what we're seeing is more low revenue organizations when we say low revenue, we mean sub 250 million, are losing resiliency as opposed to gaining it. And more high revenue organizations are, for better or worse, maturing into leaders in cyber resilience. They're getting a sense of how to deal with this, and they're adjusting accordingly. So human nature follows. The path of least resistance, I think, is something that universally every human understands. Yeah. Cyber criminals are the exact same way. They are going after the unprepared because they are the least resistant path. What do criminals want? We already said that. Money. It's that simple. A lot of people think like, oh gosh, they want our data. They want the social security numbers so they can do stuff. No, they just want to make money. Whatever that vehicle looks like, they want to take money and put it into their own pockets. A great example of this, we were talking about a story about 6 months ago. There was a notorious dark web operator out of the Ukraine. It was a marketplace. So those in our audience are familiar with this. You can often find these marketplaces on the dark web where you can buy and sell the tools that you use to hack, the data that you steal. It's sort of like a dark, rougher version of eBay, right? Yeah. And you can make a lot of money being just the tradesman. Look at Amazon. Amazon makes a ton of money just being the shop, right? There's money in the shop. And what happened was, for once, we actually caught one of these guys. He was in the Ukraine. The average Ukrainian salary, about 6,000 to 7,000 USD a year. He had a Maserati in his driveway. They confiscated that along with over $100,000 of cash. It is incredibly lucrative to be in this ecosystem. How they get in? There's a ton of different ways, but mostly phishing. If you're watching this, you're probably going to see this. Phishing is horrendous. It never ends. I get alerts when you get phishing emails. You get phished quite a bit too for some reason. I don't
know why. I get phished on my text messages. I get phished on email. It's horrible.
I'm getting probably about 5 or 6 phishing emails a day on average. Once they figure out who you are and what you do, they're notorious about that. I see you
Yeah.
get them because we have some alerting on that. There is not a single person who's going to watch this show and say, I've never gotten a phishing email in the last year. Like I will go on the record. I will go on the record. I will bet that you have received a phishing email in the last year if you're watching this.
And they're so good nowadays, you may not even realize that's what it is.
Yeah.
It just looks so good. They've got everything. They've got all their ducks in a row. And sometimes it's just one little tiny detail that's different from something that a real email would have in it. And like the capital I instead of a lowercase L.
I've seen some good ones where they replaced Microsoft.com, or I think it was like Microsoft.live, but they replaced the the lowercase I with a lowercase L. And unless you're really looking for it, you never see it, but otherwise it looked exactly like a Microsoft email. And that's the other thing too, and I want to talk about this, valid accounts. Passwords are still a thing, and I hate passwords because they need to go the way of the dodo bird, but they're still a thing for at least the next few years. And what happens is I mentioned this before, humans take the path of least resistance more often than not. I will stand by that, unfortunately. And we reuse passwords. We're all guilty of it at one point or another. We've used the same password for something. Well, what happens is these websites, these services, if you got caught by the AT&T breach, for example, I know a lot of people got letters in the last month on that. Well, the hackers have this password and they have an email address that's associated with the login. And they say, hey, I wonder what else I can log into with these things, right? And they program a little bot on a computer and it goes nuts, shotgunning the internet, seeing what it can log into. That does work. There are also remote services businesses do run often, like for example, like a remote server you can access over a VPN, from home, or maybe you have something that you connect to remotely in the cloud. That often, if it's not managed correctly, can be a security factor. We had to remediate, actually. We had back in 2019, an organization where they had a server inside their building. It was a big organization. They had a server that had about 12 years of data on it, and it's facing the internet. Some hacker got in there, managed to guess the username and password to the login screen, basically, and they ransomed the entire environment. They ransomed the backups, they ransomed everything. This was 5 years ago, right? This is before this really picked up. It took 3 weeks to put that organization back the way it was. Almost 3 weeks. It was a nightmare. And actually, funny enough, I like to tell this story because sometimes it is just the weirdest things that are saving graces. The reason we were able to help that organization, because we came in and we're like, where's your backups? They're over here in this box. Oh no, these are encrypted too. We can't use these. There's no data. And they're like, well, we think there was a consultant here 2 weeks ago, and I vaguely remember he put all of our data on a hard drive and took it home with him. Maybe he still has it. And I was like, okay, I have questions. That probably shouldn't be okay, but at this point, I don't care. And we called the consultant. He did have the hard drive, so we were able to restore it. But I was like, talk about saving by the skin of our teeth right there. And then, of course, here's the other thing too. Publicly facing applications, the cloud doesn't sleep. When the cloud services get hacked, there's no turning off your cloud computers, for example, right? Microsoft, Amazon, G Suite, we use these services daily. They're on 24/7, and if you have the right credentials and the right things, you can exploit them, sometimes without those things. So they study your weaknesses, and they get in. So I know this seems doom and gloom, but we cannot, I think, undersell the severity of this. This is a real problem. And by all accounts, it's going to continue to get worse. There's just too much money. It's now, in terms of a profitability center, by all apparent accounts, more lucrative in terms of profitability and less risky than the drug trade. You can operate from the safety of your own home with no extradition treaties and make money, as opposed to drug running or running across borders and international things. And what are we supposed to do? It is a real problem, but if you're in the United States and you're being hacked by someone in Russia, there's very little law enforcement can do if those people stay in Russia. It's been a notorious problem. I use Russia because we pick on them a lot, because we always find there's a lot of gangs there, but it's not just Russia. There's other countries as well that absolutely are notorious for this.
And they don't need much in the way of infrastructure. They don't need a lot of tools. You've got a computer and tech savvy. Pretty much all you need.
I watched a 15-year-old kid with no prior experience, just as an exercise, figure out how to get on the dark web. It took him about 3 minutes of Googling, because there's plenty of articles that'll teach you how to do it. Download a web browser on his computer that allows him to access the dark web. find the equivalent of Google for the dark web. There are search engines for it, and end up on a website with fake IDs. It was insane. Yeah, including those in the U.S. Sorry, Dave Alton just commented. Yeah, there's hackers in the U.S. too. It's not just we are not guiltless in this, but they tend to go other countries. Most of them are smart enough not to go in their own backyard. Most, not all. But yeah, I've seen that, and it's not hard to be a cyber criminal anymore. And I use the word cyber criminal instead of hacker. I think earlier I used the word hacker. I don't want to use that word because there are plenty of people in the cybersecurity community that would call themselves hackers, and that used to be a more innocent thing, right? Being a hacker used to be, and a lot of people will still say it is, figuring how to make things do things they weren't supposed to, right? Innovating, figuring out how to like be toys. That is not the kind of people we're talking about. We're talking about honest to goodness criminals who just want to make money. So I like to use the term cyber criminal more often than not. Well, what are we supposed to do? Well, first, we're going to have to wake up here. I just Google here. This one was kind of in our backyard, Amy, and I know you and I talked about this one a lot. If you're here in Columbus, the city of Granville, which is 45 minutes northwest of us, is that right? Northeast of us. Northeast of us. Their recreation district, the Granville Recreation District, this is public news at this point, 7-person organization, annual budget of approximately $1.2 million a year, had over $713,000 stolen from them right out of their bank account via phishing. That's more than half their annual budget. Andy Cohen, you've heard of him, he lost a lot of money recently. They targeted him directly due to a sophisticated scam of phishing and texting. And then what we see at this point is even as early as 10 years ago, I went back. I started going back, like, how long has this been going on? I found an article from 2013 where a bunch of cyber criminals managed to get into the infrastructure and environment of an escrow firm and divert $1.5 million. It ruined the business. They're gone. And I was like, this is recent. This is historical. This is going to continue. We're seeing a trend. It's going to keep happening. So once you decide, hey, this is not going away, and that's the biggest thing. This is not a fad. This is not a part-time thing. This is our new reality. There's just too much money. I'm a business owner. I go where the money's at, right? Like that's part of being a business owner. These criminals feel entrepreneurialistic. They say, hey, there's easy money here. We're willing to do a lot to keep the easy money train going. So they're not going anywhere. So you got to make the active decision to protect yourself. Cybersecurity, unfortunately, is not a passive decision. Would you agree with that, Amy? It's not a passive decision, just doesn't happen by itself.
Absolutely.
You got to protect yourself. Here's the exponential. This is from Statista. They actually put a nice little trend together and trillions of dollars of how much they're expecting growth over the next few years in cybercrime. They have historical data. We saw less than $1 trillion in 2018. It went to 1.6 trillion, 2.95 trillion in 2020. And then you see after 2020, it starts growing exponentially. 6 trillion, almost 9 trillion in 2021, 8.5 trillion in 2022. They actually pegged the cost closer to 11 trillion this year. They're saying it could be close to 14 trillion in 2024, 17 trillion in 2025. It is a rampant problem. The world's changed.
Yeah, that to see that the graph, it's impactful to actually visually see something that's not tangible on the screen. All of a sudden, it's a scary. If your business revenue graph looked like that, or something else in your life looked like that, but that is not the type of trend that you want to see.
If your business looks like this and you're looking for investors, let me know. Seriously, like I want to get it. That's what I'm thinking right now in my head. Like, okay, you've got my attention. We're expecting it to more than double in the next 3 years in damages. That is going to come and impact everybody because here's the thing. The only thing the cyber criminals need to make this happen is for you to have an email account nowadays. That's it. Tell me one person that doesn't have some kind of email account. My 87-year-old grandfather with Parkinson's disease has an email account still in his nursing home. Like we all have it. We're all digitally connected, whether we want to admit it or not. And the other question really is I hate to say it, but all of our money is essentially digitized nowadays. It's all ones and zeros in a bank. Like, when's the last time I went to a bank and withdrew everything I had in cash, right? Like, it just doesn't happen. And guess what? That money is literally, I do this every month. I pay my mom digital money every month for some bills that we share on like a subscription service. It's log into a web portal, click, send money. Did I lose you, Amy? Oh, there you are. You're back. You froze. I mean, it's that simple nowadays. Anything to add to that?
Well, convenience is, if I go to the store, I use my phone. I use tap to pay. It's so convenient, so awesome. Like you said, the online banking, it's so convenient.
Venmo.
But
Oh my gosh, Venmo is so convenient.
oh my
Venmo.
gosh.
Remember
So,
having to write checks for people when you had to pay them back or
oh,
something? Remember that? I was
oh
like,
my
no, I don't.
gosh.
Venmo came on. I'm like, nah, here you go, buddy. Like, it's there you
Even
go.
even more so for me because I'm older than you are, but now, but the thing is how do we imagine a world where what are we going back to the paper? I mean, what is there that can be
It, it,
done?
I mean, it goes to show. We recently had an experience not that long ago. If you want to see it, and it's not the point of today's talk, but a lot of you were impacted by the CrowdStrike incident that happened a few weeks ago. One vendor managed to basically shut down a chunk of the world because they messed up in updating a bunch of computers because we realized that everything is digitized. Everything runs on ones and zeros to the point where we can't put planes in the sky if the computers in the office aren't working. Like that was scary because you understood the implications of understanding necessarily how we got there. And unfortunately, I think you're absolutely on point. We're not going back. We're too far gone. The world's digitizing. I think that we're going to see more and more emphasis on security controls in the future. And yeah, it's something small businesses are going to have to wake up and deal with because the criminals are absolutely coming for them. They know that, comparatively speaking, I know a lot of small businesses say, I don't have that much money. If you have $5,000 sitting in a checking account, that's half a year's worth of work in the right country. You have a bank account with $5,000. That is worth weeks of work for a criminal to go after. That is a really stark thing to say, but it is true in the world we live in. So what do we do? I've been a lot of doom and gloom here, so I want to give people an option to start taking control. Things changed. And unfortunately, the old way of doing things was buy some antivirus for your business, do some backups, and you're good to go. And I don't fault you for thinking that way because as of like 6 years ago, I think I would have probably gone on the record and said, yeah, you'll probably be fine if you do that. That's not where we're at anymore. There's some controls that every single person should look at honestly, both personally and for your business. And we put together a checklist for businesses specifically where they can take it and say, okay, do I have these controls already in place or is there a gap? And it's free. There is no cost, no commitment here. I'm going to go ahead and put it up on the screen. This QR code, you can also find it at cyber.tabernacle.tech/quiz. Will take you to an online survey. On average, it takes about 7 minutes to complete in my experience, if you're being honest with yourself when you're ready to kind of dedicate to it. What happens is you fill it out, and then what it'll do is it'll score you, and we'll send you instructions on how to grade yourself. And based on what your results are, you can say, okay, I have gap in ABC. I know how to take control. We want to help. We want to make sure that our audience can take control and has a place to start. I don't want a paywall, for lack of a better term, the ability just to start the journey to figure out how to do the basics to protect yourself. And Amy, you've done this quiz, I think, haven't you?
Yes, I
Yeah.
have.
How long did it take you? And I love to use you as a reference point because you're not the most tech savvy person in the
No,
room. So how long did it take you to go through that, you think?
less than 10 minutes, but I was really scrutinizing the answers. It was just a few minutes, but it was also very enlightening. And even though I don't own a business, I thought it was really useful, just to thought provoking so yeah, just a few minutes.
Awesome. Well, go ahead, take control, guys. We are here today primarily to raise awareness and to give you the beginning tools of where to start. Obviously, if you have any questions as well, I'm going to put this up in the chat, but you can go ahead and give us a call at wrong one. Sorry, I thought I had it ready to go and it gave the wrong one. So here is our phone number. I'm gonna put it in the banner below. If you want to go ahead and talk with somebody instead of taking an online quiz, we are absolutely open to take your calls as well. We're here to help the community wherever possible. But if you're not ready, if you don't want to talk to us, totally understand, right? We're random people on the internet. Go ahead and take our free quiz. Check it out. Gives you a checklist of where to go. One last time, My name is Logan Edmonds. I'm CEO of TTS. We're a cybersecurity company based out of Columbus, Ohio. And Amy, go ahead and introduce yourself one last time, and we'll go ahead and exit.
I'm Amy, and I would love to guide you in the right direction. Like to put you in touch with Logan. He's definitely the expert, but we definitely care about the future of cybersecurity and
We
people
care about
understanding their risks.
Yeah, we care about people, I think, is a fair thing
Yeah,
to say too, because we don't want to see people on the other side of this. We really don't. We want
no.
to see them be proactive and manage this, not be the victims of this.
An ounce of prevention. It was your grandma always said. Well, it's really true because to to go and do damage control is so much more exhausting and financially exhausting than it is to prevent something from happening.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next one.